And thank you very much for joining us for yet another edition of Translating Strategy into Performance Management with Technology here on Amogi Trade Communications. This beautiful third Monday of August 18, 2025. My name remains Tolu Omodara, and it's such a joy, a delight, a pleasure, a privilege actually to be welcoming you warmly to this beautiful episode. How have you been? Hope you have been having a beautiful month of August and a beautiful half year too, and also quarter 3 of 2025. Once again, you are very welcome to the third episode in the month of August of this beautiful program, Translating Strategy into Performance Management with Technology. On the overall, this is our 6th episode of the program, and we would be launching it into it as we usually do by doing a quick recap of the last episode. Right now, last episode of the program, we focused on using technology to become strategic in performance monitoring. I repeat, using technology to become strategic in performance monitoring. If you recall, 2 episodes ago, we had emphasized the need to be strategic in performance monitoring because time is a limited resource and performance monitoring resources are limited, so you cannot devote the same amount of attention to every performance metric because, like we always say, strategy is discriminatory. To be strategic is to be discriminatory. You have to identify the 20% of metrics that will deliver the 80% of outcomes, of impact, of results, and so on and so forth. So you also want to be more focused in terms of channeling the performance monitoring resources to those critical measures. Very, very important. Now, following 2 weeks ago, we then looked last week at how do you use technology to become strategic in performance monitoring, having established the need to be strategic in performance monitoring. Right now, one of the things we said, of like we always say, is that technology helps you to become as strategic as possible in performance monitoring. However, technology is not going to do the thinking for you. I'm going to say that again. Technology helps you to become as strategic as possible in performance monitoring, but technology is not going to do the thinking for you. It will never do that. You have to think in terms of frameworks, right? You have to identify the performance monitoring frameworks and the performance monitoring sub-framework, as a matter of fact, not just the performance monitoring framework, but the performance monitoring sub-framework of the entire performance management framework, right? So when you do that, technology, of course, would help you enable, it would accelerate, it will optimize, it will bring efficiencies, increase visibility, create early warning systems, and so on and so forth, right? So once you have that framework in place, then technology, you can use technology-enabled dashboard, for instance, to put appropriate focus on different key, well-defined performance measures. Very, very important, which should have a start point, a midpoint, and an end point. We said that last week is really important. So for each performance measure, you're supposed to know where you are. If, for instance, you want to grow revenue by 20% in the performance period, you want to know where you are at the beginning of the performance period. Perhaps you're at $40 million in revenue at the beginning of the performance period, and if you want to grow your revenue by a total of 20% at the end of that performance period, then you want to have increased revenue from $40 million to $48 million at the end of that performance period, right? And so mid-year into that performance period, hopefully you want to be around $44 million if you were at about $40 million at the beginning of the performance period, and then at the end of the performance cycle you want to be at $48 million. So you must have your start point, your midpoint, and your end point metrics defined in terms of numerical measures. Very, very important, quantitative measures. Now, technology can be used to flag significant gaps between those set metrics and your current point, right? If, for instance, halfway into the performance period, or you are at $42 million instead of $44 million, in other words, instead of being at least 10% into your performance, your revenue growth, if you have set a target of 20% for the total period, then halfway into the period you should be at about 10% growth. So instead of being at about 10% growth, instead of being about 44 million, you are only 5% into your growth. In other words, you have you are increased your revenue by 5% instead of 10% midway into the performance road, which means that you have achieved only about 25% of your goals at about 50% of the performance period. I hope I'm not sounding too numerical or too mathematical. Bottom line is this: if you have only achieved like 1/4 of your goals halfway into performance period, you can use technology to flag that, right? And that's the purpose of performance monitoring. But instead of doing it manually, technology can help you to create those early warning signals. Once you have preset your minimum, right? For you to create those early warning signals, you must have defined the minimum that you should be by a certain period. So there are predefined metrics that, okay, by this point of the performance cycle, we should have this in numerical terms, and anything less than this should be flagged. Then technology can help you to flag those significant gaps, between set metrics and your current point. Now, of course, technology can also be used to flag certain areas where the organization has significant gaps, right? So let's imagine that you have key performance things that should have been derived from the strategic themes, like we always say, and those key performance themes are, let's say 5, right, or 4. We usually don't like to have more than 4. We recommend not more than 4, so they can be truly strategic and focused, right? So let's say you have 4 performance themes, and out of those 4 performance themes, most of the members of your organization are doing well, relatively well, averagely well in 3, but there is a particular performance theme where everyone is lagging across the organization. During your performance monitoring period, technology should be used to flag those areas, right? Because that could mean that there is an issue that needs to be addressed at the top level in that particular performance/strategic theme. So technology can also be used to flag certain areas where there are significant fire across the organization. Now, you can also add this in, and I think that's where we'll wrap up for the sake of time in terms of the recap of last week, even though there's a whole lot more. But let me throw this in and we'll move on to the topic for today. Technology can also be used to flag certain departments or divisions that may be doing significantly poorly. Let's say across the organization, the average score is, say, 65 to 70%, right? That's the average performance score. But there is a particular department or division or unit that is performing, let's say, at 30%, then technology can be used to flag that significant departure from average. Similarly, technology can also be used to highlight, on the positive side, departments, divisions, regions, units, or even individuals that are exceeding the average significantly. Well, I think this is where we're going to draw a line in terms of the recap of last week. Please do well to check out the program. It's uploaded on our YouTube page. Subscribe to our YouTube page, invite your friends, your colleagues, your management team. There's a whole lot to learn on our YouTube page on how you can use technology to enable performance monitoring as part of translating strategy into performance management with technology. Once again, we are very glad and grateful to have you on this edition of the program, and I would be going into the thrust of today's episode, which is a flow from last week's episode. Today, we are going to be talking about using technology to connect strategic planning with performance planning. I'm going to say that again: using technology to connect strategic planning with performance planning. Now, this is something we have talked about severally and we will continue to allude to in different forms, but we feel the need to focus on it this week, especially from the technology point of view, right? Remember, we talked about the strategic management cycle, Amogate strategic management cycle, which we call the PIMA cycle. P standing for planning, I standing for implementation, M standing for monitoring, E standing for evaluation, and R standing for revision. I repeat, we talked about Amogate's PIMA strategic management cycle, right? PIMA, P standing for planning, I standing for implementation, M standing for monitoring, A standing for assessment, and then R standing for revision, right? That's the PIMA cycle. Now, there is also the Amogate performance management cycle, where P, that's the PMA cycle, P stands for planning / contracting, E stands for execution, M stands for monitoring / coaching, A stands for assessment, and R stands for rewards and consequences. Now, like we've established, translating strategy into performance management with technology means connecting every part of this PMA cycle, that's the strategic management cycle, with a corresponding part of the PMA cycle. I'm going to say that again. Translating strategy into performance management, right? Translating strategy into performance management, with or without technology, is about connecting every part of the strategic management cycle to the performance management cycle. So the strategic planning, for instance, must be connected with performance planning, right? The implementation of strategy must be connected with the execution of performance goals across different levels of the organization. That's why, to begin with, the planning must be connected. The performance plans of different roles of the organization should derive from the overall strategic plans of the organization. It's the overall strategic plans of the organization that should be cascaded into different performance plans of the organization. Similarly, the M, when you're monitoring the strategic plan of the organization, you do that by monitoring the performance plans and the implementation of the performance plans of the different roles within different structures or different levels of the organizational structure. Also, when you are doing an assessment of the strategic plan of the organization, that should be equivalent to doing an evaluation of the performance goals set for different roles within the organization, right? And we are also assigning rewards and consequences after doing the performance evaluation. That should also be feeding into your strategy, reinvention, revision, and so on and so forth. So again, translating your strategy into performance management means that you're connecting every part of the strategic management cycle to the corresponding elements in the performance management cycle. So last week we looked at the monitoring part using technology, but this week we now want to talk about connecting the strategic planning, right, of the organization, the strategic plans of the organization, to the performance plans of different roles within the organization, but looking specifically at using technology to enable it. Like I said, we've alluded to this virtually from the beginning of this program 6 weeks ago till date, but we are now focusing on using technology to enable this connection between well-defined performance plans and the strategic plans. Now, let's start with the strategic plans. Now, remember, the strategic plans of the organization must begin with strategic themes. Very, very important. We've said this and we are re-emphasizing it, right? So there should be a general strategic direction of the organization, and that strategic direction should be distilled, right, into performance themes, strategic themes like a pattern, which, like we said, should not exceed 4, in our opinion, to keep them truly strategic, focused, concise, streamlined. And then those strategic themes, right, in terms of connecting the plan to planning, those strategic themes should be linked with the performance themes of the organization. So if at the organizational level we have 4 strategic themes, for instance, let's say we have profitability, we have agility, we have sustainability, and we also have for instance, we also have flexibility, right? So we have profitability, like, whatever we do this performance period, this strategic period, we must be profitable, right? Maybe we have practiced or implemented the principle of loss leadership for a period. Loss leadership there meaning that there was a period where it was strategic for us to take some losses, position ourselves for the long term, and we said that, well, we have taken enough of those losses, we have practiced enough of loss leadership, it's now time for us to take that leap into profitability, right? So it could be that for that period, profitability is a key strategic theme for us. Now, when you're translating that into performance theme, right, when you're connecting plans to plans, each of the roles within the organization must also have their performance theme that is connected to the strategic theme, right? Profitability should also be a performance theme. Now, exactly what it translates into will differ across the role, but the theme must be consistent. For a CFO, it could be cost reduction, right? It could be cost efficiency, right? For them, contributing to the strategic theme as the chief finance officer and his team, TEM, right, and his reports is department contributing to the profitability theme, THEME, of the organization might be increasing cost efficiency, but definitely they have to find the connection. For the sales department, for instance, contributing to the profitability theme, THEME, of the organization, the strategic theme of profitability will definitely mean increasing, for instance, revenue, right? They want to increase the number of products sold and number of clients engaged in their services, right? For the human resources department, for instance, the profitability strategic theme of the organization for them could mean having more employees, having less employees do more, right? They probably want to, become more efficient in terms of looking at the performance goals, looking at who does what, and asking themselves, we really need X number of employees to do Y. Can we increase employee efficiency? Can we deploy more artificial intelligence for certain static, robotic, and repetitive roles? So different roles will have different interpretations, but the connection, translating strategy into performance management, begins with connecting strategic themes with performance themes. Now, how does technology enable it? One of the things technology does is to ensure that when you have those goals, those strategic themes that are set, the strategic themes must be linked with the performance themes with technology. Imagine a system that shows that like a tree, right? That shows like a tree diagram where you can see automatically that this performance theme is connected to this strategic theme, and this performance theme, and we now come down to the next level. You must also distill from the strategic theme. You must distill maximum of 4 strategic goals per performance theme to different divisions. So at the organizational level, the strategic theme set must be distilled into performance goals. Again, we would want a limited number of goals at the organizational level and ditto at the different levels of the organizational structure. But this is what is important. Those, in showing that tree diagram at the individual level, at the unit level, when I see, when technology enables me through an app to see an application, a solution like ASEF, the Among Strategy Acquisition Information from you, like the ASEF software, when technology enables me to see the performance theme that is connected to which strategic theme, the technology should also show me in that form of a tree diagram the strategic goal of the organization that my performance goal is connected to. That way, I can see at the level of the individual, at the level of the unit, at the level of department, I can see how my goals, how the performance goals set for me by my line manager, and the performance goals I am equally setting for my line reports, my direct reports, connects to the strategic goals of the organization. Now, why is this important? Because visibility is power. Very, very, very important. Clarity is power, and what brings clarity many times is visibility. I'm going to say that again. Clarity is power, and what brings clarity many times is visibility. And one of the things that helps visibility significantly is technology. Sometimes you think certain goals have been covered, but it takes technology to help us to know. We lay it out on the screen, we lay it out on a technologically enabled framework, right? When you see it, you then see that no, actually we are yet to populate this segment, or this particular strategic goal is yet to be cascaded into performance goals, right? So technology helps to increase visibility. Those solutions, those apps help you see, one, have these strategic things be connected with performance things, and two, which that's going downward, right? Then going upward, technology also helps you see which performance, which strategic theme are these performance themes connected with. Very, very important. I'm saying this because in some organizations, the performance themes may not exactly bear the same name as or the same terminology as the strategic theme, because as you begin to cascade, like I gave the example of cost efficiency, the strategic theme may be profitability at level of the organization, but at the level of a division or department, the corresponding performance theme may be cost efficiency. In another department, like that's in finance, another department like human resources or strategic human resources, the corresponding theme may be employee efficiency. In another department like sales, the corresponding theme may be increased sales, or sales revenue, and so on and so forth. So you cannot assume that the performance theme will always bear the same name as a strategic theme. But technology helps you see which performance themes are connected to which strategic theme, right? Using diagrams, using flowcharts, and all of these things would be visibly prominent, like dashboards and other kinds of technological tools will help you. That way you have visibility. It's easier for the organization to know if certain things are being captured, if certain things are underrepresented, or if certain things are overrepresented. And that way you will ensure that there is appropriate distribution of strategic themes across the organization, appropriate capturing, appropriate cascading, and the same thing for strategic goals, right? So similarly, you must ensure that you distill the strategic goals into the performance goals of different roles in the organization, right? And again, definitely the strategic goal of the organization would not be equal to the I'm talking in terminology now. The way you capture them will not be equal to the goals of different roles of the organization, right? But they must be aligned. Technology helps you see that alignment between the strategic goals of the organization and the performance roles. It brings visibility, very, very important, right? Now, you may want to say, how do you flag departures? But before we talk about departures, that's where there is insufficient correlation between strategic goals and performance goals. Before we talk about capturing the departures, let's talk a little bit more about connecting the strategic goals with the performance goals, the organization's strategic goals with the performance goals of the different roles in the organization. Now, you want to do three things. One, you want to identify which goals have which roles areas in the organization have, for instance, responsibility for which goals and which have accountability. And you also want to differentiate the weights, right? So let's talk about profitability as a goal. If the organization has, from that profitability theme, if the organization has a strategic goal to increase profitability by 40%, right? And the organization is largely one that sells, the sales department may have the greater level of weight in terms of increasing revenue, right? So the sales department may have more of the accountability for that strategic goal, while, for instance, the HR department has responsibility, because once it's a strategic goal, every department, every unit, every role must be contributing to it. But the level of the weight, right, WEIGHT, the level of the weight will now differ depending on whether a department has accountability or responsibility for that particular strategic goal. But there will be different strategic goals, right? And different departments will have different accountabilities for different roles depending on how connected it is to their own key mandates. But one thing technology does definitely is that it helps you know that, okay, this particular strategic goal has a greater leaning in terms of accountability and responsibility, and it also quickly brings visibility to it. So let's say you have that strategic goal, underneath should be accountable departments, right? So you have one strategic goal, the system should immediately show you accountable departments, those that have accountability, which is a greater weight. Then under them should be those that have responsibility for it, right? And like I said, every department, as much as possible, should be contributing to the strategic goals, but their weights should differ. Now, what technology should do, some of the things technology can do, will be to use color codes and legends to indicate division/departments with accountability and responsibility. So the legend there is like the sign. It could be a circle, it could be a triangle, whatever the software chooses to use or the solution chooses to adopt. But the legend for the department or division with accountability should of course differ from the legend for the department or division with responsibility. Ditto the colors, right? So technology should be used to, and that way it's quicker. As an organization, you can quickly tell, oh, this is the department with accountability and this is the department with responsibility. Now, the system should also be set to have a total weight of 100%, right? So when you put all the accountable and responsible departments, divisions, etc., underneath that strategic goal, their cumulative weights should not exceed 100%, but it should differ. Let's say you have those with accountability coded as red, right? Those in red should definitely be of higher weight than those with, for instance, green, because they only have responsibility. And these are some of the things that technology should be used to enable. That prompt visibility, which should bring clarity and increase responsiveness. Because the moment you can easily see it, you can easily respond to issues. We'll be taking a short break right now. I'll be right back. My name is Amoge Radio Communications. We are looking at translating strategy into performance management, which has with technology, which has been the theme for the quarter, and we are looking specifically at using technology to create strategic planning with performance planning. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Gate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions, and nations. We have worked with large businesses, international development organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Gate, our uniqueness is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, we do not leave you to the task after sourcing talent that will help the new hire settle into robust leadership development programs. We are technical experts in advising and supporting institutions on strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact@thearmorgate.org or call +234 810 999 6666 +234 807 957 4151 and +161 0504 6026 www.thearmorgate.org. Armorgate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.
Welcome back, and thank you very much for being with us on the 6th edition of Translating Strategy into Performance Management with Technology. Again, we have been looking at using technology to connect strategic planning with performance planning, right? Because that remains the foundation for performance monitoring and performance evaluation. And we've talked about this connection generally, but we are looking at it more specifically in terms of linking this tool with technology. So like we were saying, things like color codes and legends can be used to ensure that those strategic themes are well cascaded into performance themes. Well, there meaning sufficiently cascaded, right? So that no strategic theme is under captured while none is overrepresented, right? Technology, like we were saying, brings visibility. Visibility enables monitoring, and monitoring increases the chances of implementation. Very, very important, right? So you can use things like legends, things like color code to differentiate which departments and divisions, for instance, have accountability, which ones have responsibility. You can also use technology to ensure that none of the weight exceeds 100%, and also that none of the weight is actually less than 100%. Because as you take a particular strategic theme and you distribute it across different departments with different levels of responsibility and accountability, you also assign weights, right? I'll give you the example of finance department, for instance, having a greater level of accountability for maybe cost efficiency as if it were a strategic theme than, for instance, the human resources department, right? But ultimately, the different weights must all accumulate into 100%. They must add up to 100%, right? And technology helps you because you have already preset it to ensure that the total weight is neither less nor more than 100%. So technology helps you to track it, or you can easily pinpoint it if you have any a strategic theme that when it is being cascaded to performance themes, then is either underrepresented because it's not up to 100% by the time you add up the weights across the department, or is over distributed because it's higher than 100%. So technology helps to bring visibility, and that visibility helps to ensure that there is either minimal departure from standards or it is promptly corrected, because technology can easily flag it And this is still all at the level of planning. This is still all at the level of cascading the strategic plans into performance plans, right? Now, another thing technology should be used to do is that it should be used to show top level leaders, right, all the lower level reporting units with accountability and responsibility for different aspects of the strategic goals that they have accountability and responsibility for. I'll say that again. Technology should be used to show top level leaders all the lower level departments / units with accountability and responsibility for different aspects of the strategic goal that they have accountability and responsibility for. Let me explain. So, if for instance, I am the Chief Information Officer of a particular organization, and I have responsibility, for instance, to increasing operational efficiency with technology. Like, let's say operational efficiency were a strategic theme for my organization for that strategic period. As a Chief Information Officer, I'm likely to have greater accountability for increasing operational efficiency, because operational efficiency is something that is achieved a lot through technology. Technology plays a significant role in increasing operational efficiency. But I have accountability for that strategic theme or that strategic goal. However, it's not only my department, it's not only the IT department or the IT division that has responsibility for operational efficiency. For instance, the business process unit may also have responsibility for increasing operational efficiency. They are also supposed to first review processes, do a process mapping, do a process evaluation, and do a process revision, right? So they also have responsibility for that. But if I have been assigned the greater accountability for that strategic goal, technology should help me to see all the departments that also contribute to that goal, right? Because I'm supposed to be monitoring those departments. So as a top level organization, I'm supposed to see all the departments that have responsibility and accountability for a strategic goal that I am accountable for. What that does is that I can now ensure that I take that strategic goal and that I am monitoring its cascading across those departments. Cascading them meaning distilling of those strategic goals into the performance goals of the different departments, different divisions, different units, different roles that have responsibility for that. Does that mean they directly report to me? No, like I said, not all of them will directly report to a particular role that has overall accountability, but at the minimum, technology helps me to have visibility. That way, when we come to, for instance, management meetings, I can engage with maybe, for instance, the Chief Business Process Officer, and say, these are the things I just want to be sure that these strategic goals are well cascaded. I want to, or if I feel like, as a Chief Information Officer, if I feel like we don't have sufficient documentation to enable to enable automation, I can flag those things at the level of performance planning, right? At the level of translating strategy into performance planning, I can quickly draw attention to it and say we don't have sufficient documentation to support the automation of this process in order to achieve the strategic goal of operational efficiency. So the process of translating strategic plans into performance plans is something that is very critical, but technology can contribute to it, technology can enable it, technology can facilitate it, right? But it is something that still requires a lot of thinking. But like I said, today's episode has been devoted more to using technology to connect strategic planning with performance planning. I'm going to give one more example and then we would round off for today. Now, another way we can use technology to make that connection between strategic planning and performance planning is also by helping the direct reports themselves to make recommendations, right? Because sometimes some organizations, for instance, employ what's called the 360-degree performance management process, where you also have the direct reports, more or less giving feedback on their line managers. Now, this is at the level of performance evaluation, but at the level of performance planning, which is the foundation, we can also have direct reports recommending goals that they think they can use to contribute to the strategic goals. And this is why we keep talking about strategy being a co-creation exercise as much as possible. We've emphasized in several programs in Amogate that what you do not co-create is very, very likely to lack ownership. And once there's no ownership, it might as well be dead on arrival, right? So we keep talking about the need to have people make input, your direct report, other members of the team, just like at the level of the management team, you should have different members of the management team commenting on different roles or different departments that should have an input into the strategic goals they're responsible for. That's at the peer level. Also, in terms of bottom-up contribution, you should also have a system that allows subordinates, recommend goals, how they think they can contribute. Because if strategy has been well done, right, you don't impose strategy. You set the strategic direction as the overall management, right, from the board to the CEO, to the C-suite officers. But no strategic planning process is complete without getting the input of the lower level employees, right? Those at lower level of the organization should also have the same. Right? You will have your way because you have accountability, but they also have responsibility. That's why you have that's how you achieve cooperation. That's why you achieve ownership. That's how people get a sense of ownership. So a good technological tool, just like the ASEP software, allows a dialogue between the performance planner and the performance executor. The performance planner is largely the line manager, right? And the performance executor is the direct report. So the performance executor will definitely be allowed to comment on those goals. When his or line manager sends the performance goal, he or she should also say, I agree with this, or I would like to suggest this. That process goes before the performance contracting, is when the back and forth has happened and the employee has been allowed to comment, and the line manager is also coaching, because this is not a punitive process, right? This is not an autocratic process. It's supposed to be as co-creative as possible. So when the line manager has suggested those goals, recommended those goals, the direct report should be allowed to also give comments. The ASEP software, for instance, that's the Amogate Strategy Aspiration and Implementation Framework software, has those segments in the solution where the direct reports can comment. Now, similarly, in the different direct the different roles in the organization can also be allowed to suggest, and this is connecting strategic planning with performance planning. They should also be allowed to suggest the contributions their roles can make to the relevant strategic objectives. Now, whether or not those suggested performance goals will be adopted will then be a function of the line manager's prerogative. But at the minimum, those direct reports should be allowed to take the initiative. That's how you do not just have a culture where goals are handed down and people just want to do enough to get fired, but people actually own the goals and they even want to see the organization exceed its targets. This cooperation is something we always emphasize very strongly in strategic planning process. So technology can be used to enable that co-creation in the performance planning process, in that process of translating strategic plans into performance plans. The employees, whatever software, whatever solution that is being used to translate strategy into performance management should also have, those boxes. They should also have those, those chat sessions, or they should also have those segments. Now, those segments, of course, will be optional, right? Those segments in the solution will be optional, whether it's a job box, whether it's a form, it's not going to be required, unlike their performance goals, which is a required segment, right? It's required. They must, as a matter of compulsion, sign the performance contract, but they are not required to suggest performance goals that can line up with the strategic goals of the organization. But of course, those who once you promote that culture of cooperation, subordinates or direct reports who are also willing to grow will take that initiative to make those recommendations. But in beyond just having it as a culture, technology can also be used to stimulate that co-creation process that enables direct reports to contribute and suggest performance goals that align with the strategic goals of the organization from their own viewpoint. So if I am, for instance, a legal analyst within the organization, I'm not likely to be suggesting performance goals that line up with, for instance, cost efficiency, but I may be suggesting performance goals that line up with, something like operational efficiency, because maybe I'm seeing the kind of issues where, or the areas where we tend to get sued as an organization. And I'm saying, okay, to increase operational efficiency, we need to watch out for these areas, and therefore I would like to suggest this performance goals from my perspective as a legal analyst. So it's all about allowing employees to take ownership, allowing those or contribute to the performance planning process, now using technology to enable that co-creation process and that process of translating strategy into performance management, that process of allowing those who have the benefit of depth in terms of their roles to also suggest how performance goals connected to their roles can contribute to strategic goals of the organization that is in tandem or that is highly relevant to their own job descriptions and to their own contributions to the organization and to the strategic objectives of the performance/strategic period. Wow, I think this is where we draw a curtain on today's edition of the program, Translating Strategy into Performance Management with Technology, episode 6. We have been looking at using technology to connect strategic planning with performance planning. Thank you so much for doing this. Remember, you are the reason why we do this. If we put all of this together and you're not listening, or you're not, when I say listening, not just running through, but actually deploying the principles that we have shared, then it's not going to be optimal. For us, we want you to understand these principles, we want you to implement those things, review your organization, see where you're strong. Are we strong in linking strategy with performance planning? Are we strong in linking strategy planning with performance planning? With technology, are we doing well with linking monitoring, ensuring that we are monitoring strategy by monitoring the performance implementation? Are we strong, in terms of distilling those goals, from the organizational level to the lower level? Are we strong in terms of encouraging co-creation with technology, ensuring that technological tools are there to enable the co-creation? These are some of the things we want you to continue to do, and of course we are always here as Homegate Communications Consults to support you through the process. We're very good at this. We've done this for almost 2 decades. We've worked with private sector organizations, public sector institutions, non-profit organizations at local, regional, national levels in helping to strengthen their strategic planning process. We facilitate strategic planning sessions. We help to document strategic plans in a way that is detailed and very easy to connect with the performance management frameworks in the organization. We've designed performance frameworks for public sector institutions, private sector organizations. We are very, very good at what we do, and we're here to support you. We're also here to support you with trainings as well, to help to ensure that even when those systems and those frameworks have been designed, that your people are also enabled to own them. And of course, we also have the ASEP software, the Homegate Strategy and Implementation Framework software, that we can also bring to your organization, introduce, and help you see how you can link strategy and performance management with technology. Thank you so much again for doing this with us. My name is Solo Mother. I'll be back same time, same station next week. I just respect to them and my colleagues have other programs from tomorrow to Friday, and we continue to bring you rich content at geopolitical, economic, technological, strategic dimensions, and entrepreneurial perspectives as well. And the reason we do this, like I always say, is you. Until we see you, I see you same time, same station next week. Remember to make sure you are connecting your strategic plans with your performance plans using technology in order to ensure that you are increasing the chances of implementation at the operational levels. Thank you so much, and see you same time, same station next week. Until then, remain strategic in planning, in execution, in monitoring, and evaluation. See you. Have a